If you end up becoming a pilot for a major airline, it's probably a job you've wanted to do since you were pretty young. It requires more than 1,500 hours of flight time, passing tests, and it's an investment. The training can cost more than $100,000. And once you have the job, it's a heavy load, both the responsibility you have at work and all the time on the road, which can cause stress at home. But there are rigid rules for how you can take care of your mental health and deal with emotional stress when you're a pilot. Want to take antidepressants? You're limited to a small list of approved medications, and you're looking at long delays while the paperwork and your fitness to fly gets reviewed by the Federal Aviation Administration. And if you're not on medication, but diagnosed with an issue, say anxiety or depression, that opens up a pathway to bureaucratic scrutiny, which can also result in having to take time off work. I get why the system is cautious. When you're an airline pilot, you are responsible for the public's safety. You might remember a horrific crash from 2015, a pilot who had been treated for depression and was deemed fit to fly by the F.A.A. deliberately crashed a Germanwings passenger jet into the French Alps, killing everyone on board. That tragedy made the public hyper-aware of the stakes involved. It's what the industry points to as to why the rules need to be rigid. Then in 2023, there was another disturbing story that hit the headlines. A pilot named Joseph Emerson experienced a psychotic break and actually tried to crash a passenger plane mid-flight. He wasn't the pilot flying the plane, but he had been in the cockpit, and thankfully no one was hurt. But he later revealed his psychosis was likely triggered by mushrooms he'd taken days earlier. He also admitted he'd been self-medicating his depression with drugs and alcohol. He didn't want to go on an antidepressant like his wife had urged him to because he was afraid to lose his job. Emerson's case sparked a renewed debate around the standards for mental health in aviation. Were strict rules keeping passengers safe or pushing pilots suffering with mental health issues further underground? Within the past year, some changes have been made by the F.A.A. There are a few more psychiatric medications that were put on an approved list, along with less strict language around certain mental health conditions. And a new bill in Congress was just introduced this month aimed at making more changes. And as you'll hear in this episode, there are also more informal ways pilots are coping, like going to life coaches instead of therapists who bill through insurance, or setting up peer support hotlines. Though for many, the easiest thing to do may be to just keep quiet and ignore any mental health care needs they may have because the stakes of disclosing are too high.
It's an overarching thing in the world of aviation that if you have something wrong with you, dear God, do not disclose it to the FAA because they will take your license and they will take your life.
This is Death, Sex, and Money. The show from Slate about the things we think about a lot and need to talk about more. I'm Anna Sale.
Spring savings are in the air, and at Ross, where they have savings on all the brands you love. From the latest fashion to outdoor decor and even pet supplies, savings are in every aisle. Go to Ross and save 20 to 60% off other retailers' prices on your favorite spring finds.
This episode is brought to you by Discover. If you've listened to Death, Sex, and Money for a while, you know how important acceptance is when it comes to personal growth. And you know who else is big on acceptance? Discover. You see, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. That's a whole lot of places and a whole lot of acceptance, which is great for Discover, but even better for you. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/credit card. In 2021, a licensed therapist named Cora sensed an opening in the market that she could fill, providing talk therapy to people who worked in the aviation industry. But she called it coaching.
I have this most millennial thing ever. I made an Instagram account and made some very niche memes and mental health tips with aviation puns and references. I predicted we would hit about 2 in 6 months, and it just exploded. I probably got close to 50 in the first 6 months.
There was pent-up demand because the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, the big government body that oversees all aerospace in the United States, has strict rules around when and how a pilot can seek mental health treatment.
For pilots, there are certain diagnoses, or even in some instances, just reporting going to therapy itself that can trigger certain red flags when they're recertifying their medical certification.
A pilot's medical certification, what people in aviation just refer to as a medical, is required to fly an airplane. Every pilot needs one, if you fly at an airline or just as a hobby. And to get one, a pilot must pass a fitness test with an aviation medical examiner. If you don't pass, your medical gets deferred, sent to the FAA's office in Oklahoma City for review, a process which can take months or even years. So pilots have incentives to avoid any record of mental health treatment or a mental health diagnosis.
Up until this last year, basically any diagnosis was an automatic deferral to get your medical reviewed, which could take 6 months to 2 years. Mm-hmm. So by calling this life coaching, it does not fall under that medical professional visit.
And when you are orienting yourself to a new client who works in aviation, how explicit are you that this is going to be like therapy, but it's not going to have the risk of showing up on your permanent medical record in the way that you know it can?
Mm-hmm. Pretty explicit. When I do the consult call and at the end of it, I'm like, any questions? Half of the questions are like, so can you just like super duper confirm that I don't have to report this? Or, you're not writing a diagnosis down to create a paper trail for an insurance company.
I walked into that office and I remember they had me fill out this form prior to the appointment. And it ended up being like, that was like the single form that just derailed my entire livelihood, basically.
A 21-year-old student named Andrew learned the hard way that disclosing mental health treatment could get in the way of his dreams. He's at an age when lots of us are still blindly looking around for what our purpose and passions are. Andrew is not one of those people. He knew from elementary school that he wanted to fly planes.
My parents were always perplexed because my favorite part of the whole vacation was like getting to the airport 2 hours early and like going on the plane for like 3 hours, which to most people is like a horrendous experience and something that they hate. But like to me, it was like what made the vacation. That was kind of my
highlight.
First. Yeah, that was kind of my first.
The journey is the destination.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh? Like why?
I don't even know. Like, it's a hard thing to decide. I love that traveling aspect of it, and I love the buttons and the systems and the sensations that you get of flying a plane. It's a very surreal experience, and like to be able to land an aircraft at 100 miles an hour is it's magical to me.
Andrew was in high school when the COVID pandemic hit. He'd already decided at 16 that he wanted to go to a college with an aviation-specific program, and he had plans to get his private pilot's license.
My whole sophomore year of high school, everything shut down, and, like the rest of us, I was home for, 2 months doing absolutely nothing. And I talked to my parents about it, and I worked out kind of the financial aspect of it, and I called up some of the local mom and pop flight schools around where I lived. And I think it was that week, actually, I ended up going out there and taking my first flight.
And what did it feel like getting to learn how to fly?
Oh my God, it was it was an amazing experience. I was over in North Idaho. Basically, it was the mom and pop flight shop, and so they're used to seeing, all of the midlife crisis guys, and the kids that are just kind of learning how, and like the old retirees that are looking for more stuff to do. And so they're like,
Wait,
"Yeah."
that's who takes flight lessons? It's teenagers, people in midlife crisis, and retirees?
I mean, at
It sounds right.
mom and pop schools for sure, yeah. And I ended up learning with like this fresh flight instructor. It was this really old, beat up, ancient plane. I think it was from 1958 or something.
My
And
goodness.
yeah, it was missing gauges, and like it was a whole ordeal. But yeah, we took off, and then it's something that you like. I mean, if you fly commercially, you see occasionally, but out of the front of the plane is something that isn't very often seen. And to take off over the area in which you live and just see everything from above was a very cool and surreal experience. It was very cool.
Hmm. Um, that is cool. Like, I'm imagining when you're doing Zoom school, stuff is shut down in your community, and you're also getting to take flight lessons. Was that like the highlight of your week when you got to go and just be in a plane and be
Oh,
above it all?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the only other thing I did was like go to, the store with my parents, which is something that I didn't do since I was 10 because there was nothing else to do. So yeah, that was definitely the highlight.
For a lot of teenagers, the pandemic was a dark time for their mental health. Andrew felt happy and motivated. Flying gave him purpose, like he was working towards a goal. It hadn't always been like that. When he was 12, he was prescribed Zoloft for anxiety.
In addition to my loving planes from a very early age, I've also been a very anxious child from a very early age.
Mm-hmm. So when you first started noticing as a kid that anxiety was getting in the way of just how you wanted to be, how did it show up for you?
As a kid, a young kid, especially like pre-puberty, it was a lot of like expectation and control and I guess planning to a certain extent. So like needing to know all the details and like having built up, what's going to happen when I do this, and having like plan A, B, and C figured out in case something goes wrong. And if that wasn't the case, I would get super anxious.
Mm-hmm. I'm picturing like tantrums
Oh,
or
yeah.
like not participating if
Yep.
it's not on the terms that feel comfortable.
For sure. Yep.
And with your medication, have you had trouble? Like, is it still something you feel like you have to figure out how to manage your anxiety, or does it feel like your medication has been serving you well?
I mean, I feel pretty confident in being able to say that I've been in remission for the last 8 years. I mean, I have flare ups. I had a grandpa die when I was 14, and the high school girlfriend. So little things that would upset anybody. But I handled them all pretty reasonably, I think, and I wouldn't say that I necessarily struggle with any extreme anxiety anymore. It's very well managed.
So when it was time to get his medical certificate, to get his private pilot's license, he didn't think much about his medication. He said his instructors at his flight school told him it would be an easy process that should be a quick formality.
Yeah, just go get your checkup. You're a healthy teenager. They'll take your blood pressure, check your vision, and then you'll be good. It'll take like 20 minutes. And it did not take 20 minutes. It was definitely a shock. I walked into that office, and I remember they had me fill out this form prior to the appointment, and it had you list every single time you had been to a doctor dating back like your entire life. So I put all that stuff in there as they instructed me to.
When you started filling out that form, were you by yourself or was one of your parents there with you?
I was doing it with my mom because I didn't know half, like what was the name of my pediatrician when I was 2. I didn't know that, so I had to ask her. And she didn't even know it either. We had to go like request the files from, the online portal.
Mm-hmm.
But she was there next to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were you aware at all that being on SSRIs could get in the way of you doing what you wanted to do in
N-
aviation?
Nope. I had no idea.
When did you come to understand that?
So I had the form in my hand, and the doctor came into the examination room, and he saw me and he assumed I was just like all the other ones, like I was a healthy kid, and he was like, "All right, cool, let's get this printed." And the receptionist went, "You might want to take a look at this form real quick." And he was like, "Oh, are we gonna defer this?" And like I didn't know what defer meant, and she was like, "Yeah, definitely." And so he looked over it, and he was like, "Okay." And then he left with the receptionist gal and came back like 10 minutes later and just like super direct and honest, which I appreciated. He said, like, "Here's the deal, dude. This is not good. Um, there's a very good chance that you may never be able to fly again, but there's a chance that you may be able to." He said, "I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to take months, if not years, and it is going to be an extremely, extremely expensive process to go through getting a medical." And I was just like in awe, My mom had left at that point, so it was just me.
Mm.
Um, I was a 16-year-old kid, and I was like, "What is happening right now? Like, what do you mean? Like, what's wrong with me? I'm a pretty healthy kid."
Hmm. So what did you decide to do after this was explained to you that you needed to go through a battery of tests that would take a long time and a lot of money?
Yeah, so I called my parents and my grandparents from the parking lot rather erroneously, and I was like, "Hey guys, pilot thing is not going to work out. I don't know what I should do now. I know I've always been good at arguing. I can be an attorney." And everybody was like, "What are you talking about?" And so I
You're
like,
like in the parking lot. You're like, okay, new life plan time.
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. I mean, both my grandparents and my parents basically said like, "Shut the hell up. Like it'll be fine. We'll support you. We'll figure this out. We'll do it together." Um, and I was like, "Man, I don't think this is gonna work. But if you guys want to try it, then sure." And so we did.
After that, Andrew had to figure out how to undefer his medical application with the FAA. He said it was hard to figure out where to start. The website was confusing, without clear directions.
And so you spend several months just trying to figure out, what does this all mean? When does it need to be done by? How does it need to be done? Where does it all go? And obviously, how much is it going to cost?
It ended up costing thousands of dollars. He had to see a psychiatrist to write a special report. He also had to be evaluated by an FAA-certified medical examiner, which required driving across state lines and paying out of pocket. And he had to collect all his medical records dating back to birth. It took 2.5 years to get all of the paperwork together and sent in. Then he waited for a response. The answer finally came 2 days before his first day of college.
But I got the packet back 2 days before, and they said, basically, like, "We're unable to give you a medical at this time based on everything that you've provided us." And it's, in telling people this and family and friends, I just say that they denied my medical. But the which isn't necessarily true. I'm just too lazy to tell them what happened. What they actually said was, which I almost think is worse than just denying me, is they said, "We can't give you a medical right now, but if you go back and you do everything that you've done over the last 2.5 years, if you go get all of those expensive neuropsychological reviews, if you go get another review from a psychiatrist, if you re-upload all of your medical records and you maintain your current dose of medicine, then we'll reconsider."
They weren't saying no. They were saying, we're not confident enough that we've contained the risk to zero, so we want you to do it over again.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever think back and wish that you just Like, do you think in your case it would have been possible to just not disclose?
100%. Yep.
Even with that record of, that you're still on medication and you had medical records, you think you could have just not disclosed that and then it would have been okay? They wouldn't have caught it?
Yeah, I think it's a felony. It's a federal crime to lie on that document. But I do think if I didn't say anything, they wouldn't have necessarily had a reason to look. And I think part of my basis for that assumption is just knowing how many people don't say anything because they know not to. So the FAA, when they're kind of cutting out all these anxious people, they're not stopping pilots from being anxious. They're stopping pilots from telling them that they're anxious.
Pilots who are caught lying about their medical history to the FAA can receive up to a 5-year prison sentence and a $250,000 fine. So instead of lying, a lot of pilots choose not to look under the hood, so to speak. One 2022 survey found that more than 50% of pilots avoided seeking some sort of medical treatment because they were concerned about losing their medical certificate. Coming up, a pilot who made it to a commercial airline describes the specific mental health stressors of the job.
I describe this career as being one of the most social, but most isolating careers that you can probably imagine.
This week, as we are talking about the many challenges of being a pilot, we thought it might be useful to have a broader conversation about different workplaces. In our Slate Plus feed this week, I talked to the columnist behind Slate's new work advice column. It's called Good Job. And the writers Dori Shafrir and Laura Helmuth offer advice about bad bosses, unfair workplace cultures, and the little unwritten rules that many of us follow, but some like to test.
I recently got a question from someone who had just had her first office romance kind of go awry.
Oh.
And I'm so sorry that you also had to learn this lesson that, like,
yeah,
most of us have learned. And no matter how many times someone tells you, hey, don't do this, you kind of have to learn it for yourself.
If you are a Slate Plus member, that episode is waiting for you right now in your special ad-free podcast feed. If you are not yet a Slate Plus member, we would love to have you join. You'll get ad-free episodes of our show and every podcast that Slate makes, and bonus episodes like our work advice conversation. You can sign up directly in Apple Podcasts or Spotify on the Death, Sex, and Money show page, or just go to slate.com/DSM+. And we are also collecting more questions for you about a totally different topic, one of our show's tent poles, money. We're in a moment where our economic futures feel particularly uncertain. There are questions swirling about the future of Social Security, how tariffs will affect businesses and grocery prices. It's a moment we're asking, what do I do? How do I save? It just doesn't have a clear, good answer. So to try to help us think about it, we're convening an advice panel with some financial experts and also people who think about the future in unconventional or out-of-the-box ways. So send us your timely and timeless money questions. Like, are you in a job where AI or changing federal priorities are making you feel like you need to plan for contingencies but don't know where to start? Or are you wondering whether you should buy a home, or is your money better kept in a high-yield savings account? Are tariffs affecting your business and you're considering a pivot? Is money anxiety keeping you from trying something or making a big transition that you dream about? Send us the sort of money questions that are keeping you up at night, whether they be particular to this moment or as timeless as credit and debt. Record a voice memo if you can, or just send us an email at deathsexmoney@slate.com. This episode is brought to you by the ACLU. The ACLU believes the Trump administration is pushing a dangerous and sweeping attempt to control our bodies, our families, and our lives. President Trump has signed far-reaching executive orders that target transgender people, their rights, and their health care. But the ACLU and their partners are in court fighting back. Meanwhile, the ACLU is also at the Supreme Court fighting for the future of transgender people's freedom and bodily autonomy for all. U.S. versus Scrimetti centers on a Tennessee law restricting health care access for trans youth. Tennessee has asked the Supreme Court to expand the ruling that overturned Roe versus Wade to allow it. The ACLU believes the fights for abortion and trans health care are connected. You can learn more at aclu.org/autonomy. It's springtime, which where I live means the poppies are blooming, the maples are sprouting new bright green leaves, and it's all making me want to move through my home with a bottle of Windex and a wet cloth for dusting to create fresh starts. In my bedroom, it also means I am putting on my crisp white sheets from Brooklinen. It feels great crawling into a newly made bed with my silky yet cool Brooklinen sheets. They just feel so good. If you prefer a little color, they also have this nice light sage color that makes you feel like you're sleeping in your own bright springy chrysalis. Gear up for the change of seasons with the linen and luxe line of bedding from Brooklinen. It's grounded in an optimistic palette, and for cooler nights, Brooklinen also has soft, breathable Dreamweave waffle bed blankets for layering. Brooklinen's customizable bundles make it easy to refresh your bed and bathroom, putting everything you need in one place. And Brooklinen sheets are tried and true with more than 200,000 five-star reviews and millions of happy customers. Shop award winners and fan faves in-store or online at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com. Visit today for an exclusive new customer offer. This episode is brought to you by Understood.org. The diagnosis of ADHD in women skyrocketed during the pandemic. Now, one health and science journalist is asking, why women? Why now? And how has underdiagnosis impacted women's mental health? Introducing Climbing the Walls, a 6-part podcast series hosted by Danielle Elliott. Climbing the Walls investigates why women with ADHD have gone undiagnosed for so long and how that changed dramatically during the pandemic. Tune in to hear insights from mental health experts and candid conversations with women living with ADHD, including from women who have been writing and thinking about ADHD in adult women since the mid-90s. I learned in the first episodes of the series that though it seems like this recent surge of diagnoses is based on some kind of new scientific understanding, it's not actually true. It has been decades that people have been looking at the science of ADHD in adults, particularly women. What is changing is the conversation about stigma and shame. And this series also investigates how ADHD rubs up against our expectations of how women ought to behave and what they ought to be able to do. Join Danielle Elliott as she sheds light on the surge in ADHD diagnoses among women and shares her own deeply personal story. To listen to Climbing the Walls, search for Climbing the Walls in your podcast app. That's Climbing the Walls. This is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate. I'm Anna Sale. A pilot we're calling Jay has been a captain at a major airline for 6 years. He didn't want to use his real name because his airline employer didn't authorize our interview. And it generally feels risky to talk about emotional stress as a working airline pilot. But Jay says he tries to be open with his coworkers as much as he can.
You're literally locked in a little room with another person that all you can do is talk to one another for hours on end. Because that's what we do on these long flights. Everyone wants to know what happens when we close the flight deck door. We run our checklist. We get into cruise, set the autopilot, and
talk about your feelings.
Get to know each other. Yeah. It's kind of weird thinking of two guys just talking about feelings for hours on end, but sometimes it comes up. It's like the long road trip.
Jay's job requires him to fly continuously for 3 or 4 days in a row. That means a lot of nights away from home.
I spend about 120 nights a year in a hotel.
120 nights.
and we don't get to keep any of those hotel points.
Being an airline captain carries a lot of other responsibility. They're the most senior position on the plane, the final word if something goes wrong. Jay says it's also a leadership position that extends beyond the air. He keeps track of his crew when they're grounded in a city overnight between shifts.
I would say it more often feels like I'm the dad hanging out with folks that aren't the dad.
Mm-hmm. The dad, what does that look like when you think about the dynamic around a table?
Okay, guys, let's all go back to the hotel. It's time to start wrapping it up for the night.
I don't have to travel much for work, but when I do, I know how you can get the blues when you're away from home, when you're in a hotel room by yourself. That is built into your work environment, moving around, being on the road. Is loneliness a stressor, you think, for pilots?
Very much so. You're around people all day long, but then you get into a hotel room, you close the door, turn on Netflix, maybe speak with your significant other or your family, but you're there by yourself in a room. And some people, they aren't overly social with their crew. They don't go out. We call them slam clickers because that's the last thing you hear from them until you see them in the morning is the slam of the hotel room door and the click of the lock.
Slam clickers.
Yes, so that's a thing. But this is an incredibly isolating business, and we spend a lot of time away from our families and loved ones.
Like anyone feeling isolated and dealing with the stress of a high-stakes job, pilots can cope in ways that are healthful or harmful. Experts say that substance abuse appears in the pilot population at about the same rate as the general population. But again, disclosing a problem can come at the cost of their job, so many don't. But pilots do talk amongst themselves, and Jay's been trying to figure out how to be a part of supporting each other. He volunteers for a peer support hotline, and when the FAA convened a task force last year for recommendations on better managing mental health in aviation, he raised his hand to participate. He said that he, like many of his colleagues, knew pilots who died by suicide. His first loss came in college. It was a close buddy.
I was having some trouble with my car at the time, and I had reached out to some friends asking if anybody knew anyone who could help me with some issues with my car, and I was referred to James. So he and I ended up spending some time wrenching on my car together.
Oh.
And we sort of formed that male bond together during that time. He was new to the program. He had actually moved into town from another small town that I used to live in. So he and I kind of had this parallel path for a long period of time. And he and I were both pursuing the same degree at the same place at the same time. And a couple weeks later, I had met his wife, met his daughter. We had that bond together, and I saw him the night that ultimately would be his last evening with us. Of course, it's one of those things that kind of swirls through your mind, like, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you interact with him more? There's so many things that could have been done. But ultimately, I don't know what was going on in his life that caused him to make these decisions.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. When you've thought back on your friendship with him, do you think about it as something particular about the culture of school around studying to work in aviation that you think made that less likely that you would talk about? Or do you think it's just kind of the waters we swim in or in America, particularly for men?
Particularly for men, yes. But even in the aviation sphere, there's a lot of pressure to perform and to succeed. And there's a very high cost to it as well. It's a very expensive career to pursue. A lot of people take on massive amounts of debt up front in the hopes that a couple years down the road, once it's all complete and you make it into the professional world, that you'll be able to recoup those costs, end up ahead. There's just this strong pressure to not say anything. You want to keep your head down, just keep swimming, and just not try to raise any issues that might get you reported somewhere on an anonymous tip line, or have those questions raised that might get you grounded and have this passion that you're trying to achieve taken away from you.
If you're a working airline pilot, you have to be evaluated by an aviation medical examiner at least once a year to determine if you're still fit to fly. They can either recertify or defer your medical license. And if you're over 40, you have to do it twice a year.
Oh, I think every pilot that comes in here, regardless of whether it's a career or not, is nervous about passing their medical. I mean, that's one of those things that, everybody is one exam away from being a non-pilot.
Dr. Brent Blue has been an aviation medical examiner for 40 years. He's trained in family and emergency medicine and in flying. He's based in Jackson, Wyoming, but when we talked, he was at the airport in Driggs, Idaho.
I started flying when I was in college, so I've been a pilot. I was a pilot before I was a physician. I always like to tell people that.
Dr. Blue says from where he sits, FAA rules have not kept up with how modern medicine has evolved to think about mental health.
I think what's happened is that the FAA has created rules over the last 70 years, and those rules have not been reevaluated on a consistent basis over time. I mean, 70 years ago, Freud was still considered a psychiatric genius, and now most of Freudian psychiatry has been pretty much eliminated. And so the way we evaluate pilots for mental health issues is totally different. We know now that much of the depression we see in medicine is chemically based. It is not psychologically based. And so there are medications, and very effective medications, that allow pilots to fly and function just like a normal person. And so those pilots shouldn't be evaluated on a psychiatric basis. They should be evaluated on a medical basis. And that's one of the crux of the problems the FAA is having at this point.
And if you could describe to somebody who doesn't think about what the risks are in the work that you do, when you are talking with a pilot and trying to evaluate their mental health and whether they're safe to fly, what are the stakes of that work?
Well, the stakes obviously could be very serious, especially when you consider situations like the German wings accident that happened quite some time ago, where a pilot basically committed suicide and took 100 plus passengers with him. But for the most part, the stakes are not near as high as you would believe. For instance, one of the things that happens in U.S. aviation is they never have a pilot in the cockpit by themselves, like happened in the German wings accident. Mm-hmm. So if there's a two-pilot crew and a pilot has to leave the cockpit, say, to go to the bathroom, a flight attendant will enter the cockpit while they are gone. And that essentially eliminates a lot of the risk of one pilot suddenly becoming incapacitated or doing something harmful because of a mental health issue. Obviously, there are some people who should never be pilots. People who are schizophrenic should never be a pilot because they have too many significant mental health issues. But most simple depressions, I mean, if you eliminated every pilot that had a simple depression, or every American, for instance, that had a simple depression who wanted to be a pilot, you'd eliminate half the people who would be applying for a pilot certificate.
Last year, in 2024, the FAA did make some updates to their mental health guidelines. Some new psych meds were added to the approved list, though a pilot has to be grounded for the first 6 months of taking new medication. A trial period Dr. Blue thinks should be shortened to 6 to 8 weeks, which is closer to the time frames observed in Europe. The FAA also has rewritten the rules around depression and anxiety. It's a diagnosis that won't automatically defer you, but if your situation meets other criteria, like you've had multiple episodes of depression or anxiety or a history of substance abuse, you will be deferred. Dr. Blue says while these changes are a good step, he wishes medical examiners still had more flexibility to rely on their own medical expertise and training to evaluate the whole person on whether or not they're fit to fly. There's still a lot of binary yes-no checklists.
It's improved like a slight bit. It is, one tiny leap for the biggest problem we have, and this I say this as far as all aviation medical examiners, is we can say no, but we can never say yes, but. And that's a problem because the FAA doesn't let us do or make decisions in most cases.
When you say we can say no, but not yes, but, that means it's a pass-fail as far as what you're able to do.
Well, yes. In other words, we're given templates, and the templates will have check marks, and there's a yes and a no. And you have to check everything correctly for a pilot to pass his medical. But if you have to check one of the negatives and there's an explanation, it doesn't make any difference. You still can't do anything with that. The FAA says you have to then defer the application, and that just wastes everybody's time. So we've become in many situations just a clerk. And when a kid shows up and they've said they've taken ADHD medicine and it's been within the last 4 years, but they haven't taken it in 2 years, they're basically going to be waiting 9 to 12 months before they get their medical, and they're going to spend a lot of money that's not reimbursed by insurance because it's not medically indicated.
So, as you look at the templates in front of you when you're doing a medical examination for a pilot, are there some days where you just say, "Why am I doing this? This is frustrating, and I don't think this system works. I can give this up."
I can truly say that if I didn't care about pilots, I wouldn't do this. If I didn't care about aviation and the ability of people to fly and the future of aviation, I just wouldn't do it. It's just not worth the hassle.
Coming up, what happens when tragedy strikes the aviation community and pilots have to manage their own grief and stress while assuaging public anxiety?
When I first walked into the airport, it was kind of expected, but everyone looked a little nervous to be there. And there were a lot of other pilots asking the same question: what do we do to help the public feel more reassured, more comfortable flying with us after an accident like this? And I don't know that there's a singular right answer to it, but I've been emphasizing that we are professionals. We are highly trained, fully qualified professionals here for your safety, more so than anything else.
This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Shopping at Saks is the easiest way to discover the best new styles to elevate your everyday look, especially when you're short on time. At Saks, you'll find inspiration for every occasion, from casual outfits to special events. Here's a true story. Just the other day, I realized that I don't really have a pair of quick slip-on sneakers that I feel cool in. And I actually searched on my laptop, "cool mom sneakers." And that was not a very fruitful internet search. And then I went to Saks.com and I just searched under shoes and then sneakers. And I could get a good look at what's on trend, what is classic. I could think about what is the right sneaker for me in 2025. It was like having a current lookbook to help me figure out my particular cool mom sneaker identity. The thing that I can just put on with jeans and make work for errands around the neighborhood, or wear for a cool casual look at my next work event. I'm still mulling my exact pair, but while I was there at Saks.com, I hopped over to the accessories vertical and checked out a pair of Elisa Johnson sunglasses that are also very cool. Whether you're refreshing your entire wardrobe or shopping for a vacation or just trying to find some everyday sneakers, Saks makes it fun and easy. If you are looking for a fun, effortless shopping experience and want to elevate your personal style, head to Saks. That's Saks.com for everyday inspiration. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. Shopping at Saks is the easiest way to discover the best new styles to elevate your everyday look, especially when you're short on time. At Saks, you'll find inspiration for every occasion, from casual outfits to special events. Here's a true story. Just the other day, I realized that I don't really have a pair of quick slip-on sneakers that I feel cool in. And I actually searched on my laptop, cool mom sneakers. And that was not a very fruitful internet search. And then I went to Saks.com and I just searched under shoes and then sneakers. And I could get a good look at what's on trend, what is classic. I could think about what is the right sneaker for me in 2025. It was like having a current lookbook to help me figure out my particular cool mom sneaker identity. The thing that I can just put on with jeans and make work for errands around the neighborhood, or wear for a cool casual look at my next work event. I'm still mulling my exact pair, but while I was there at Saks.com, I hopped over to the accessories vertical and checked out a pair of Elisa Johnson sunglasses that are also very cool. Whether you're refreshing your entire wardrobe or shopping for a vacation or just trying to find some everyday sneakers, Saks makes it fun and easy. If you are looking for a fun, effortless shopping experience and want to elevate your personal style, head to Saks. That's Saks.com for everyday inspiration.
We have a phone line that's available 24 hours, 365 days a year, staffed by pilot peers.
Jay volunteers for the pilot peer support group at his airline. It's a phone line where a pilot can call if they're having a hard time, and another pilot picks up.
So when somebody calls me and they want to just talk about, say, a training issue, they've got a big evaluation coming up, and they're just feeling that stress, that anxiety building up because it is an extremely stressful time in their life and in their career. They just need somebody to talk to about it. It's really helpful and beneficial to have somebody who's been through it.
Is it confidential?
Up to an extent. Barring imminent harm to self or others, everything stays within that dynamic between the peer and the peer supporter.
It was in a peer support text group that Jay first heard about the deadly plane collision with a helicopter back in January over the Potomac River that killed 67 people, all the passengers and crew.
I was actually out of the country at the time. I was on a short vacation, and I just immediately turned on the TV, and there was the security camera footage of the accident just on a loop, on repeat. And it was shocking. It was horrifying.
Yeah. How did you collect information about whether there were people you knew who were killed?
Most of these companies use scheduling software that allows us to add friends and to be able to see their schedules, see when we might mesh our schedules and be able to spend time with one another, go get dinner, hang out for a couple minutes in an airport where we just might happen to be crossing paths. And I know I went down the entire list of everybody that I knew, everybody that I was connected to on this app, just making sure I knew exactly where they were. And eventually, a friend of mine found who the crew was, and I knew a couple of them on the airplane.
Jay said that the crash was something that came up on the peer support network. People wanted to talk about it. But at first, he said, he and his coworkers processed the news in sort of an analytical way, how they'd been trained.
We analyzed so many accidents during our training to learn from them, to be able to learn what went wrong and how do we avoid it. So that sort of mindset tends to kick in and we start analyzing it. But once we get past that academic filter, it starts affecting us in an emotional way.
Mm-hmm. Was it hard for you to go back to work after that collision?
I thankfully had a couple of days off where I could sort of mentally recenter myself and get myself to a stable spot to be able to return to work. It was 4 days after the accident, and just thinking about the night before, like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be able to lead my team? And it just popped in my head, send a text to your crew members the day before, let them know that if they need more time to deal with it, take the time. If you're willing to come to work, we're going to be there for one another, and we're going to be there for one another and work through it together.
That text was a solid dad move, Jay. It's very caring.
Well, I would hope so. Since I'm already like knee deep in the realm, and I have some experience dealing with the touchy-feely stuff, it gets a little bit easier to just dive straight in those conversations.
Knee deep in the touchy-feely stuff is a funny way to put it.
Yeah.
Andrew, who had first applied for his medical when he was 16, is now in his third year of undergrad. What's your current life plan? Like, how do you see the next 5 years, 10 years going?
I'm a pre-law major, studying for the LSATs right now. I've got all my law schools picked out, and I am aiming to be an aviation attorney.
Is recreational flying something you, like, still want to do as a pilot?
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to, yeah. I am still very involved in that world. I ended up living in the aviation-specific dorm at school. And so all of my best friends are...
When you commit hard, man.
I know. So all of my friends that I made here are in that program. I have several friends that have already graduated and are licensed commercial pilots and flight instructors. And I haven't stopped, loving the aviation world at all since they denied me my medical. And so I would absolutely love to get back into it down the road.
Mm-hmm. Is it hard to be friends with people who get to think about being commercial pilots? I've
kind of reconciled the last few years. Being a commercial pilot is not on its face a very sustainable path. If you want to have a family, if you want to, have a home, if you want to have, good relationships, it's not good for that, being away all the time and having to hide all these health issues and mental illness being so stigmatized. Everybody is depressed, and everybody's an alcoholic, and they all smoke, and they all have these vices. And so just that unsustainability kind of helped me reconcile that maybe this is a better path that I'm on in the long run. So, yes and no. It's been hard, but I think I'm going to be fine.
That's Andrew, super fan of airplanes, who no longer is trying to be an airline pilot. Thank you to everyone who talked to us about aviation and mental health. While we were recording interviews for this episode, the New York Times Magazine ran a great in-depth piece about pilots and mental health. The reporter Helen Ouyang talked to Joseph Emerson, the pilot who had that scary episode in 2023, and lots of other people on the issue. There's a link to that article in our show notes. This episode was produced by Zoe Azulay. The rest of the Death, Sex, and Money show team includes Cameron Drews and Andrew Dunn. Daisy Rosario is our senior supervising producer at Slate. Hillary Fry is Slate's editor-in-chief. Please support the production of our show by becoming a member of Slate Plus if you haven't already. You'll be supporting our team, and you'll also get access to benefits like ad-free listening to our show and all of the podcasts that Slate makes, including Slow Burn and Decoder Ring. You'll also get access to special Slate Plus drops. We make at least 2 of those a month, and they are special and fun. You can subscribe directly from the Death, Sex, and Money show page on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or visit slate.com/DSM Plus to get access wherever you listen to podcasts. Our theme music is by the Reverend John DeLore and Steve Lewis. If you are new to our show, welcome. We're glad you're here. You can find us and follow us on Instagram at DeathSexMoney. And I write a weekly newsletter. Subscribe to get that at annasale.substack.com. And you can reach the whole team anytime with voice memos, pep talks, questions, critiques at our email address, deathsexmoney@slate.com. We love hearing from you. Jay, the pilot, told me he is single. He says dating while living an itinerant lifestyle is tough. But I tried to give him some ways to spin it. You could put in your little tagline on the apps. You could say, "Yes, I move around a lot, but DM me about my pension and my companion passes."
Oh gosh, the buddy pass system isn't what it used to be. It isn't what people assume that it is.
How's your pension? Is your pension good?
Pensions actually aren't a thing anymore.
Oh my God, never mind. You could talk about all the souvenirs that you could bring back from all over. Provided
that TSA lets me bring them.
You keep making arguments against my ways to sell you.
I appreciate the effort.
I'm Anna Sale, and this is Death, Sex, and Money from Slate.
Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast.
Money can be confusing. Should you invest in ETFs, get a travel rewards credit card, buy a house, or just build a really fancy pillow fort?
That could work. No shame in pillow fort game. Or you could just tune in for clear, research-backed financial insights.
I'm Sean Piles, a certified financial planner professional.
And I'm Elizabeth Ayola. We're the hosts of NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast, where you bring the money questions and we bring trustworthy information backed by NerdWallet's expert analysis, without the jargon or the sales pitch.
Our nerds do the research so you don't have to. We'll help you understand your options so you can make the best decision for your situation, from optimizing your investments and maximizing credit card rewards to making big money moves with confidence.
Plus, we keep it real. No lectures, no judgment. Just tips and tools you can use to build wealth and take control of your finances. Think of us as your financial GPS, helping you navigate your money decisions and avoid expensive wrong turns.
Whether you're planning for retirement, weighing a big purchase, or just want to make your money work harder for you, we've got insights that you can use in real life.
So, if you want practical, straightforward, and actually useful financial knowledge, plus a little bit of fun along the way, follow NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Trust us, future you will thank you.